Hi, everybody. Welcome to another JetBrains webinar, a Rider JetBrains webinar. This is the first webinar of 2024, so it's really exciting. So thank you for joining us. I'm really excited about today's guest, but before we get to our guests, let's do the regular housekeeping that we do in these webinars. So if you're joining us live right now, head on over to the YouTube chat. There's always a lot of good conversations happening there. If you have any questions during the webinar, I'll be keeping track of them. So we can kind of keep track of them, ask our guests those questions at the end of their presentation. YouTube chat's always fun. Please join us there. I also think we're streaming on Twitch. So we can actually see some of those comments coming over from Twitch. Feel free to ask them. You might see your comments during this presentation. So again, please ask some questions. A big question that always gets asked during these webinars, is this session being recorded? If you need to take the dog for a walk, pick up your kids, that kind of thing, you can always pause or leave and come back. You can find any and all these recordings on JetBrains TV. So be sure to like and subscribe there. Hit that notification bell, and you'll know when all those recordings come up. So on that note, let me read a short bio of our guest today, and then we'll introduce them. So Chris Woodruff, aka Woody, has been developing and architecting software solutions for over 20 years. Wow. Woody is a former engineering team leader for Rocket Homes. He's currently a software architect for Real-Time Technologies. On top of his work life, he's also a community leader, helping events like GR Dev Night, GR Dev Day, West Michigan Day of .NET, and Beer City Code. He's also brought the popular Give Camp event to Western Michigan, where technology professionals lend their time and development expertise to assist local nonprofits. As a speaker and podcaster, Breakpoint Show, check that out. Woody has discussed various topics, including database design and open source. He has been a Microsoft MVP in Visual C#, Data Platform, and SQL, and was recognized in 2010 as one of the top 20 MVPs worldwide. So with that, those accolades, the prolific, I'm going to introduce Chris Woodruff. So Chris.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm just a little winded after that,
I know, thanks.
that
You did have to
bio.
read. Well, yeah, you did have to read the whole thing, but I do appreciate it, and I appreciate being on the webinar for the start of 2024. So let's have some fun. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, there's already folks talking in the chat from all across the world. So again, I'm going to give the stage to Chris, but if you have any questions during this webinar, please feel free to ask. I'll be marking them, and maybe we can get to them at the end of this webinar. So Chris, the stage is yours. Good luck.
Thanks.
Let me know if you need anything from me. So.
Okay, I'll take over. So good or bad, it's all me. So I always like to have quotes. I love quotes. And if anyone knows who Jim Gray is, Jim Gray was a pioneer in relational databases, and he actually used to work at Microsoft, and he sadly went sailing one day from around San Francisco and never appeared again. He was sailing by himself and disappeared, and we lost a great kind of mind in our industry. But I always like this quote from a book that he helped partially write, and it's all about curating data. And that's why I love APIs and I love OData, because we need better tools for data analysis and data curation. So that's the quote. So we're going to talk about OData, and we're going to talk about it as a protocol and it as a implementation based on that protocol. So it's really important to explain and make sure people understand what a protocol is. A protocol is something, it's kind of like a wrapper. For us in .NET, we have interfaces. So imagine OData is an interface, and it doesn't subscribe how to implement something. It just describes the what, the like the features that have to be implemented, and whoever wants to implement against that protocol can implement against it. So where did it come from? So in 2007, Microsoft released a project called a Project Astoria. That name has been reused many times, but it was kind of a web service project, and it was everything together. Well, it was kind of interesting. And in 2010, Microsoft had kind of looked at OData and said, this is interesting. We can actually create a protocol based on Project Astoria, and we can implement OData against it. And we can call the protocol OData, which is open data, the open data protocol. So I just want to make that clear that in 2010, the protocol was announced at another Microsoft event, and the first version came out around then. The version that we have primarily today, which is version 4, came out in 2014, and it was submitted for ISO standards. And that ISO standard is actually has a committee that controls it. That Microsoft is part of that committee, but there's other tech companies that are part of that committee, and that's out at Oasis. So I like to give kind of the history sometimes where things came from. We do have one question. Does OData say anything about how error information should be presented? No, you can implement. You can implement. The protocol doesn't state how you declare and implement your errors. I think you should probably stay with standard REST errors. For me, I usually use just standard errors, 400s, some 400s, some 500s if it's on the server side. Sprinkle in some 300s here and there if needed. But no, there's really no. You're just sending back a response, and with some kind of HTTP response code for the error. So let's talk about the pros and cons of OData. So there are advantages and disadvantages. One advantage is it's based on a standard. It's based on the protocol of Open Data Protocol. The other advantage that I love about OData, and why I really loved it even back in 2007, was metadata. And back in 2007, metadata wasn't viewed as that important. Now it is, and I think having metadata that comes with your data gives a lot more context to that data. And so I love the use of metadata. We'll show that in the some of the demos and stuff like that. The other advantage is you can develop client code very fast because it is based on the standard. It is based on the protocol. So clients know, hey, this endpoint, being that's OData, can implement these features, and so I can just quickly get up to speed and build those. And there's actually libraries that will build the code for you also. It will actually, you point it, some libraries to to an OData endpoint, and it will actually spit out code that you can use to query and do all of your endpoint calls. But there are disadvantages. So you are limited to what the protocol gives you. So being that it is a protocol, you are limited to that protocol. I guess you can expand on it, but just you can't assume that anyone that is going to then use your endpoints will do that. And it looks like it was abandoned 10 years ago. So Vlad, sadly, I don't think it was abandoned. I think it's just not been a high priority so much. And I'm not going to say that for the protocol, because the protocol still is in many different places. And I'll, at the end of my slides, we'll talk about that. But the implementation of OData for .NET, ASP.NET has been, I won't say abandoned, it's been neglected, which I'll talk about that at the very, very end of my talk, because there's some good news about that. So, Giovanni says how and if OData and REST can play together. So OData really subscribes a lot to REST. It uses the same kind of REST verbs, the HTTP verbs and the response code. So you can take a lot of your REST details and REST knowledge and bring it over to OData. So we talked about metadata. Every OData endpoint has what we call the service metadata document. And if you ever put a $ metadata at the base URL for your OData endpoint, you will get a document that kind of looks like this. And this is a partial one. But what this is, it's a document that fully describes all of the entities, functions, actions, it just with very good details. So in here, we can see an entity type of album, and we can see all of the properties. We can see the navigation properties, and we can see the start of another entity type called artist. So this metadata document is really what clients can use to generate code for your endpoint, and they can understand what comes of it. And the nice thing is that because of this, this is a standard, you don't really, in the .NET side, you don't really have to build this yourself. It just comes along with the OData NuGet library. So this just comes as like a benefit for it. Vlad says, I create my own .NET source generator for metadata to use with simple.odata.client. Yes, awesome. That is what this document really is supposed to be used for. It's for the client, whoever the client is, to know about the endpoint and all the features and functionality of the endpoint. So let's go through some OData examples. Sorry, I want to go through the protocol, then we'll talk about the implementation shortly. So to address in OData, it is slightly different than a typical REST call. So as you can see, a single entity, you do wrap your key or your ID in parentheses. So if I'm looking at bookmarks and I want to get to a specific bookmark, I would wrap in parentheses that key, that ID. And I can also get member access. I can do projection. I could do link traverse, so I can say, hey, I don't really want the bookmark. I want the tags that are associated with the bookmarks. So you can see that there are ways to call that. I can do deep access. I can do raw. So if I don't want all of the JSON format, I can just do a $value and I can get the raw value access. There's also ways to do presentation options. We can do sorting, filtering, paging, inline expansion, and we'll dig into these, but let's go through some examples. So if I am requesting a resource, I really will use a get verb. So most people who have some knowledge of REST really will understand this. So I can call a URL. Everything pretty much is done for querying is done at the URL. There isn't anything that you have to send over in the HTTP body. So in this way, I'm going to get all the people that are in whatever data store that this endpoint is doing. And the nice thing is I have some code for how to use the client, the OData client library. And this is how easy it is to get to query from C# into your OData. So we use link. So as you can in here, you can see client.forpeople.find entries async. So this is pretty much all asynchronous. So which is nice in today's world. But you only really need 2 lines of code to build a query into OData. To do an individual resource, like I said, you just put your key inside the parentheses after the entity type that you're wanting. So in this case, if I want Russell White and Russell White is the key for that entity, I just put that in there. You could just use integers also. If you do that, you just put the number in there without the quotes. But down below is the code for that also in C#. Queries, let's take a look at a query. So this one's a little more advanced. So I'll describe what this query is. I want all the people, I want the top 2 people in this, we'll say database, data store. And I only want to bring back 2 pieces of information. I want to have a projection of first name and last name. And I want to filter this on any trips that these people have done that cost over 300, whatever the currency is, $300, 300 pounds, 300 euros, whatever. So that is the first query. The second one, if you wanted to get ordered by last name, you can put an order by in there. So building up these URLs will give you a very very good way of building queries. Now, if you wanted to build this in C#, we can build the same thing using link. Using the OData client library, you can build that same thing in a link statement, and that will send over the same query URL over to the OData endpoint. So the OData client's very good at allowing you to use C# and link to build out these queries. We'll skip over this one. These slides will be available for everyone to get from my repo. I'll put in the slide deck, and all the code examples will be out on GitHub. So this is another query. You can just say ordered by descending, and basically this is just saying, give me the top 10 people in an order by last name descending, and just give me the first name and last name. That's all I want for the people. So I'm not going to get all the other properties, all the other fields that come along with the person or the people entity. Creating a resource. I'm not going to go into all this, but there is a way. You do have to send over your entity in the HTTP body, just like we can basically insert something using the OData client. You just have to add a new people entity to your link statement, and that will insert it into the data store, whatever the data store behind your endpoint, using the OData client. And you do the same thing for update and delete also. This is a reference. So imagine I wanted to get back all the trips for Russell White. I don't want Russell White per se. I just want the trips that he went on. So I can kind of do that. We do have this idea of functions and actions. So a function is something that I can build against a entity. So in this case, I want to know about the trips, but I don't want to know about the trips. I just want to know about the other people involved in the trips. So in this case, I have a function that will take the trip that has an ID of 0, and I will say, hey, give me back the people that were involved in trip key of 0, ID of 0. And we can see that how to build that in the OData client also. So we can call the function, which is called get involved people, and we can get back just the people that were involved in Scott's trip that he went on. And there's also actions, and we'll take a look at actions. But here's some other things that you can do. We can filter. So we can filter. This is a filter for products. We want to look for when name equals milk and the price of that product with a name of milk is less than $2.55 or whatever the currency is. We can do expand. So in this case, I want to take a look at categories, the products in those categories. So I want a category, and then under each category, I want a subset of the products. And in this case, I want products that have not been discontinued. So you can see the filter at the end. What are the most common? I'm just looking over at the questions. What are the most common HTTP verbs? There's get. So primarily, OData will use get, puts, posts, and deletes. Other than that, OData doesn't really have a patch. So there is no patch. So it's primarily those four verbs. And you can take a look at these other query options when you take a look at this, but there is a way to do projection, which is called select. So you can just select whatever you need. It's kind of the old database query adage recommendation. You never do a select star from table. You should always do select whatever fields you really want from a certain table. It's a case with OData and any query that you do across any API, I feel, never bring everything back, because you never know who's using this and where they're using it from. So my advice is always use projection, always use select, so that people that are on mobile devices or have slow internet connections don't have the latency of pushing all of the data across. Because if products here has 200 properties to it and you only need 2, don't send back 200 properties, just send back the 2. And then there is order. We can order on the base entity, or we can order inside the expand or inside the associated entities that we query. So and that's kind of interesting. We do have top and skip, so that's paging and stuff like that. Here's most of the OData data types that you can use. You'll see that they primarily go along with most of the data types that we have in our relational databases that we use. Their scalar is one that kind of is supported, but it's not quite. So does it support mapping with view model? Well, that's a topic we'll get into when we get into implementation. Okay. And I probably mangle your name. I apologize. Akshay, we will get into how to use OData and not have it push out the exact format and structure of your database. So where is OData used? It is used many different places. Microsoft uses it. If you've ever used Microsoft Graph in Office 365, how you query in Microsoft Graph uses the OData protocol. And some other companies like IBM and Oracle, Salesforce, SAP, Tableau, MuleSoft, they either have the ability to send data out in OData format, or subscribe or consume OData in OData format. So the protocol has been picked up by many different companies to use in products. So we'll come back to my last slide. Let's go out and look at some code. So out in GitHub, I have 2 projects. I have a simple OData. Okay, Thomas says, can you do pagination? And if yes, how can you ensure the consistency of the return data? So you can do pagination. There are 3 features. There is a top, a skip, and then we have a skip token. So top and skip, if I wanted the second page, if my pages were 20 entity wide, and I wanted the third page of from my endpoint, I would send in top 20, skip 30, and that would bring me back to whatever, or top 10, skip 30 would give me 10 starting at the 30th entity in that. And I can even put a filter in there. That's a nice thing about all these features. They can be concatenated together. So I could do pagination with filtering, with expansion, with whatever I want to dream up. So you just have to implement it in ASP.NET. So it doesn't come out of the box. Naturally, you do have to build a lot of this stuff. So let's show how we build this. So we actually have to, and I will show this. We're going to say managed. I will show you the two NuGet packages that you need. We have Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Data and Microsoft.OData.Model Builder. Now, as you can see, if you take a look over at framework and dependencies in Writer, it will show you that the frameworks that the OData libraries are .NET 5, .NET 6, and .NET Core App 3.1. We're up to .NET 8. So I'm going to go back and say OData has not been updated to use in current .NET versions for a little while, at least a few years. Some things are broken. I will tell you that right from the start. There are some things that just are not working right now in the current OData libraries. There's good news on that. I'm not going to give you the good news just yet, but I do want to tell you some of the down things that I have discovered getting back into OData over the last couple months. So if you do want to build OData, these are the NuGet libraries that you need. So we have to actually kind of build this OData convention model builder. So what we're doing, it's kind of very similar to what we do in Entity Framework. We build this model builder that fully describes the entity set that we are working with. So in this case, I'm using a database called Chinook that I have. You can look on my GitHub account there. I actually have probably the most current files for Chinook. So Chinook is just a representation of an online music store. So in here's all the entity types that we have, all the way from albums to tracks and all the business stuff too, like customers and employees and invoices and invoice lines. So it's a nice test library that I like because it actually has data that's interesting. It doesn't have bicycle parts. It actually has rock, jazz, metal, pop artists and all their music. So it's actually kind of fun to use. So we have all those entity types. We do have an action called rate. So this action will allow you to rate an album. So you don't have to set the rate property. You can just say, you could say like album parentheses 22 parentheses /rate, and then you can give it rate equals 5, or actually you put it into the body. I'm sorry, we'll look at example for this action, and then down below I do have top 10 rated albums. So what this function will do is return back. It will go out and find the top 10 rated albums and return those back as a collection. So a function will send back either a single entity or a collection of entities. A action does an action on an entity. So that's kind of what the difference between an action and a function are. And then at the end, we just say get EDM model, so entity data model, and we send that back. And where we send it back to is in our program, we have to add, when we add controllers, we're going to add OData. So this comes from our OData NuGet library, and we will give these options. So these options are, we're going to enable query features. We're going to add those route components. We're going to give a route prefix of OData. A lot of times when you see web API projects, they have a route prefix of API. So in this case, we're going to do OData to signify that this is an OData endpoint. You don't have to have that route prefix. That's just what you could do. And in the model, we're going to get our EDM model. So we're going to call that method that we just looked at, and we're going to add certain capabilities to the EDM model. So we're going to say we're going to add filtering, we're going to add selecting, we're going to add expansion, we're going to add the ability to order by, and we're also going to select the maximum top. This is good. Set max top is a way that you can limit the number of layers. So imagine in JSON, we can have, just like XML, we can have associated data types that come along with other data, with other collections and other entities that are in our JSON. So you don't have a huge payload coming back. You can kind of set the maximum, these maximum levels that you want to go deep. So that is kind of good. 25 is kind of large, but you can set it to whatever you want. OData does kind of work with Swagger. I will say functions and actions don't quite work. And some other, I'm not a big fan of using Swagger with OData, but right as of right now, but it is what it is. There are some broken stuff inside OData that doesn't quite work well with Swagger when it kind of looks at and explores all of the API endpoints. So, and the rest of our project is very much just like a normal ASP.NET project. We're going to add everything else, HTTPS redirection, and if you want to do authorization, and we have to map our controllers. At this point, I just wanted to see if there was any questions that people had before I run this. Swagger can't support select and expand. Correct. It also doesn't do a great, it won't give back the result set for certain things. It will find things like the functions and the actions and associations for your endpoint. It just will not allow you to execute those within the Swagger, the Swagger front end. So I don't really, if I build in a OData, I probably wouldn't add Swagger to it because of those limitations as of right now. So let's run this and see what we get. Okay, so if I bring this over, it does bring up the Swagger doc, and it does find a lot of this, the details. The interesting one is if we took this, so what I'm actually going to do is just do a OData / and then $, metadata. I'm going to call that. So I think I showed it in my slide deck, but this is how you get the metadata. This is how you get the description of your endpoint. So in here is everything. It fully describes with all the metadata. So in addition to telling you properties, it will tell you what type those are coming from, and those are based on the entity. Those are not based on the database. Those are actually based on the entities that you build within your .NET, your ASP.NET project. And this is kind of interesting. You can see that we do have functions in here. So this will tell you your functions and your actions. We do have this, all of the navigation bindings. So you can see that albums are binded. They have association with artists and tracks. So this fully describes kind of the relationship inside of our entity data model that we described in code. So if I came over and said this, so let me just do another example. I'm going to come in and go OData/albums. So give me all of the albums. So this is what it looks like when it comes back raw. I have a little Chrome add-in that will parse JSON pretty. So this is what it looks like, kind of pretty and for regular consumption. So it does bring over everything. It allows me, if I want to, the nice thing also is all of these result sets will give me back some other result sets also. So imagine I wanted to know about the metadata for albums. There is my metadata tag, and I can go right back to that. That's included sending it over from the result set. So this just has all of the albums that I have in my database that represent that. If I want to take a look at one specific artist, so let's take a look at artist 22, which is Led Zeppelin. So this is the entity set. So there's not a whole lot of information. Basically, artist is made up of a name and an ID, and also it has in the entity code, it does have some code for like the albums that are bounded to it. So so let's take a look back. How can I import the definition in Rider? Is it secured by Emma?
I think I can answer that one.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's official OData endpoint discovery support in Rider. There could be a plugin in the marketplace. I was just going to go check that out. So maybe later I'll let you know definitively. But we have made a lot of good strides with the HTTP client inside of Rider. So you can do things like OAuth, get an OAuth token, and then make those requests through the HTTP client. So there's a lot of scripting capabilities in the HTTP client. Definitely check it out. Go read the documentation. And I will also say that the HTTP client has like a jar file that you can run in CI situations. So if you want to do some integration testing, you can reuse a lot of the HTTP client scripts or code that you would have in your source. You can use those in, you can use them in Rider. You can use them in non-Rider situations. Say if you have a polyglot team that's working in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, and you can use them in CI situations like in TeamCity and GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps too. So
yep.
Hopefully that answers people's question.
Yeah. And then Mr. Clan had a very good question. Is it possible to exclude certain fields or certain properties from returned entities? And yes, there is. You can, just like you can exclude them when you're working in Entity Framework, there are ways to exclude them from coming over in your OData endpoints. If you're using Entity Framework with OData, if you turn something off in Entity Framework, those will also get turned off for the OData endpoint. So that's one good thing about using OData with Entity Framework. So I'm going to come back here, take a look at the code, the controller. I'm going to try to be done by the top of the hour. So we have about 14, 15 minutes left. If I come in here, the controllers descend from OData controller. So this gives you a lot of the OData functionality for your actions for each one of these. You do need to build out the routes. So in this case, we do have HTTP GET, and I do need to build out that route template that ASP.NET will know what that route coming in from HTTP needs to be routed to for this action. Again, everything, and you do need to enable query. These enable query annotations do have to come along with OData. It'd be nice if they didn't, but as far as I know, you do need to do that. So this project is putting everything inside the action. So probably not what I recommend. It is using a Chinook context. So this is a context from Entity Framework. So as we are coming in, I am using Entity Framework to query my database. So remember, a lot of that C# code that I showed in my slides were for the clients to do client query against a OData endpoint. You do, once you get into these actions, need at some point to use some kind of data access code, either Entity Framework or Dapper, or just data sets if you build your data access just with pure data sets. And these are pretty simple. I'm just going out and getting whatever I need. Like if I want a specific album, I'm just getting that album. If that album isn't found in the database, I am sending back traditional not found. It is found, I send back an OK. So kind of what we do with REST API endpoints. So OData really just adds, I view OData as just a layer kind of on top of what we think of as REST that gives some better ways to build out these URL to do the queries that we need. If I do a post, just like a REST, traditional web API REST, it does come in as a post. I get that album from the body and I add it and I do a created. So, I mean, it's very traditional. Can we add some data based on access level the requesting client? Yes, you can do, if you have that in ASP.NET Web API, you can have it the same functionality here in OData. Really, OData it really sits on top of Web API. So it just give some extra capabilities and functionality to bring the OData protocol to ASP.NET Web API. But everything you can do for authentication, authorization, you can do with OData. You can use third-party authentication, Khalid, give me some help. Auth0 and what's the one that starts with an O? Okta and stuff like that. You can use any of you can use any of the cloud capabilities. You can use Azure Active Directory. You can use whatever you want.
We should definitely give a shout out to open source identity server as well.
Identity server, yes. I was trying to think of that. Thank you, Khalid, for saying that. Yes, identity server. Whatever you can use with Web API, you can use with OData. And like I said, deletes and updates are just kind of like what we do with Web API. If you know Web API very well, OData will just be some small changes, and that's about it. Here is a route. So if you want a route that says, I want the artist that an album is associated with, you have to build that HTTP GET template to say, this route will go to this action, which is get artists, and I'm basically just getting the artist that is associated to whatever album you're looking up. And here is my rate, and that shouldn't be Incronet book year. Sorry, I wrote this and I forgot to change the name. That just proves that it doesn't really matter what you name your actions. It's all about this the route that you're doing, that you're telling ASP.NET. So in this action that I rate, I just will get two parameters from, and this is OData action parameters, and these are sent in the body. I will get back these two parameters. One is rating and one is ID, and I will get that album, and this is where you would rate the album, and then I would just send back a OK. So that's how you do an action. And then how you do a function is, and I'm going to tell you a secret, there is no rating property in my database for albums. So that's why there's no code to rate an album or to get back an album. But if there was, this would be the query. I would say, give me back, order by my albums by rating, and take the top 10 and get those back, and then send those back in the result set. Send these back through the HTTP response. So we have 7 minutes left. I hope this OData simple was up to your satisfaction. When this webinar was first announced, someone asked if there was a way to not expose direct shapes and the shapes and the formats and the structure from a database. And yes, you can. Because this builds on top of Web API, I am a big proponent of not exposing your entity framework or your Dapper entities directly through your endpoints. I do subscribe to building out what I call API models. Some people call them DTOs, but I just call them API models. And I do have a second project in here that I use my own web API architecture thinking to come in and it's kind of hard to explain in just a few minutes because this idea, I do have a way to build out where I can, as you can see, I have my entities. These are all coming over from Entity Framework. And then I have a corresponding API model entity that these are what are exposed through my controllers. So up here, if I come in, I actually will call, and this actually uses what I call a supervisor. So supervisor is just it's a black box that either has API models coming in to be inserted or updated or deleted in the database, or EF entity models that come into the supervisor that get using AutoMapper get pushed out as API models that can be exposed through the endpoints. And in this case, as you can see here, I have my supervisor and I just say get all albums, and that comes out and that gets exposed in this OData endpoint. Nothing special has to be done in this case. OData, because this controller is descended from an OData controller, it knows how to format the result set from my supervisor to something that OData wants. Let me go through some questions. The HTTP are not required if you follow action naming. The library has made a lot of progress to simplify the dev experience. Okay, so thanks, Arthur, for saying that. Yes, there are some things that have been maybe simpler. I like to do this because it kind of goes along with how we usually do things in traditional web API kind of thinking. And Harry says, what would an external vendor we use who does not use OData need to do to have us use and consume API calls that way? Well, one, they would have to use and build their a set of APIs using OData. I don't know if I would recommend that right now, since OData hasn't had a lot of updates in the past while. We have a couple minutes left. I will go back to my slides. I do want to say thank you, and I'm going to bring back up so I can see questions and stuff in my other monitor. But I do want to say thanks. If you want the code that I went through, you can go out to my GitHub account. It's mastering-odata. I will push out. It's not out there right now, but the slides will be out there a couple minutes after we get done with this webinar. If you do want to follow me on Twitter or Mastodon or LinkedIn, you can go out there for that. The other big announcement that I want to do today is one of my New Year's resolutions is to start a open source project that will impact the community for this year. And what I'm going to do is start actually two projects. One is update OData to really be used and fix a lot of the brokenness of OData So it can be used with .NET 8 and C# 12. But the bigger one is I am also going to build an OData library so that we can build OData with minimal APIs. Right now, there is no way to put the OData protocol into minimal APIs, and I feel that it would be a huge benefit to have OData for minimal APIs. So I'm going to build that for the community. And I think that is it, Khalid. It's 11 a.m. my time, Eastern Standard Time. So I got through in an hour, trying to see if I have any more. Are there any more big questions that I missed?
Yeah, Kelper is asking, and it's okay. You're not spamming us with questions. That's the point of these webinars, to
Yep.
have these conversations. So there's really a lot of questions about how does the process of a query coming in get translated into, say, like an EF core query. I did notice you were using the interface of iQueryable, so I assume that has a big part to play in like how that translation process happens. Correct?
Yeah. Really, because your controller descends from a new controller base called OData controller. That controller base really knows how to take result sets, either one entity or a collection, and basically turn that into OData JSON.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really what it is. Where a normal web API controller, the controller that we base our controllers on for web API, those do the same exact thing. They take a result set and translate that into JSON, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we send that back out as the result set from whatever that API endpoint was. So OData just translates it into a different format of JSON. I call it OData JSON because it adds a lot more metadata to the result set that gets pushed back.
It did seem like there was a reference to like the schema / metadata at the top of every response. So yeah, that's really cool. I did want to get to a comment from one of the viewers, dpeter99, which I thought was like really cool. They've been using enable query to add more expressive endpoints to pre-existing HTTP or REST APIs that they already have. So, it's hard not to see the similarities between OData, GraphQL, even parts of Open API, right? And I think with GraphQL, sometimes you feel like if you want to go the GraphQL route, you may have to kind of like either wrap your existing REST APIs so that they're endpoints within your GraphQL schema, or potentially like throw away your REST APIs in favor of rebuilding them in this kind of GraphQL model. So I just thought that was kind of a great comment to be like, instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which is kind of common in New Year's resolutions, maybe a good resolution is add a little bit of OData to your existing APIs. That's pretty cool.
Well, and that was what Microsoft saw with when they were building out their giant. If you know what Microsoft Graph is, so Microsoft Graph is basically a huge collection of disparate API endpoints that they basically merge into one giant graph. It's not GraphQL per se, but it's a huge graph. it's a huge kind of collection of APIs. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's still enforced, but it used to be that if you wanted something to be incorporated, if someone outside of Microsoft wanted their data set to be incorporated into Graph, into the Microsoft Graph kind of landscape, it had to subscribe, it had to be OData, it had to follow the OData protocol. I don't know if that's the case anymore, or
Mm-hmm.
if they put that layer on top. So if you just send in a REST API and they do a lot of that OData protocol layer on top of the entire graph, I don't know, but it used to be that you had to bring it in under with aided OData protocol adherence,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of services provide multiple protocols. I would imagine Microsoft Graph is pretty similar. Uh, I'm sure they still have the OData endpoints. They probably have open API specifications. I wouldn't be surprised if there's GraphQL.
mhm.
I know like GitHub has moved mostly to GraphQL at this point, like outside of say REST. So there's a world of protocols, and I think the takeaway for me from your presentation is like if you have a lot of REST APIs, it's clear that you can get a lot of value from OData on your existing code base,
Yeah,
and the simplicity of like the endpoints that you showed brings a lot to the table because now you can add things like validation, authentication in ways that you can really clearly understand, right? So it doesn't seem like there's a ton of machinery there, but the machinery that is there, uh, is just enough to give you functionality, but you're really in charge of that
yeah.
implementation, which I
You
think is pretty cool. So,
you are. I mean, you're basically wanting to use a protocol so that people can query, and really OData is a query protocol. I mean, it
mhm,
really is. I mean, what you do with the other CRUD, the inserts and the updates and the deletes, almost are very similar to what we do with web API, traditional web API, and I like it because I can, if I build an OData endpoint, people will understand what the query language is.
mhm,
But the most important thing is it's the metadata. Like there is no way in Web API to easily add metadata to your Web API result sets.
mhm,
Like I have a talk that I add hyperlinking, which really comes back to REST. One of the constraints of REST is you should have metadata in your result sets.
yep, yep,
And that's a great thing about OData is that it gives you not only the metadata document that fully describes the endpoint, but it also adds all that metadata to the result set that gives you a little better context of what your data means.
mhm. Okay, well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really it for the questions. Uh, like, let's wrap this up. I'll share kind of the information for folks here. Yeah, if you enjoyed this webinar, please give us a like on YouTube. That really helps. Leave any comments that you'd like. But if you want more information about JetBrains products, head on over to jetbrains.com/writer. You can also follow us on Twitter, X, whatever, whatever it's called now. You can also read high quality .NET content from our .NET advocates, including me. I think I'm one of them. at
You are.
blog.jetbrains.com/.net. Again, you can see this video and or this webinar and other webinars on our JetBrains channel. So check that out at JetBrains TV. If you want to see more of Chris or Woody, as he likes to be called, you can head on over to his blog at woodruff.dev. He's taking this seriously, folks. He's bought a .dev domain, so you know there's some seriously good stuff there. You can also follow him on Mastodon, mastodon.social/@cwoodruff, and he also has an X account at Chris Woodruff. And finally, again, thank you for joining us. The chat has been great. I always love seeing those comments. So if you like this, again, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. You'll see more of this good content on JetBrains TV. Again, Chris, thanks so much for your time, and thank you for the webinar and your knowledge.
Yeah, and one last thing.
Yeah,
yes, sure. 404, that repo, I need to turn it to public. So yes, that is bad on me. I did not. It's been private. I'm going to make it public right now. So.
All right. Well, thank you, folks, and we'll see you next time. So cheers. Have a good day. Bye.